seen us in a while, have you?
We're back.
Today, we thought we would do a couple women serial killers.
Oh yeah.
Because, there's two of us, so each one of us gets to do one.
Exactly. And boy, do we have a treat for y'all.
Okay, I'm going to let her start out. If I don't know, this is Baby. This is my daughter-in-law, which I claim her as my daughter. And I have not heard any of this that she has, so I'm going to be surprised just like y'all. I know it's going to be
Lord,
creepy.
is it freaky.
All right, take it away, baby.
Alright, so even though we're doing female serial killers, this is a special exception. We are doing the Bloody Benders, also known as the Bender family. And they were the first serial killer family.
You mean the whole family?
Oh yes. And they lived and operated in Lebec County in Kansas. Now a lot of people think that they originated from not Georgia, but Germany or the Netherlands. That's where people think that they were actually from. And the family had consisted of John Bender, who could not speak a lick of English whatsoever. He was not very good at speaking it. And they said whenever you could listen to him talk, it was unintelligible.
They just kind of all ran together, probably.
And then there was his wife, Elvira Bender.
Ooh, Elvira.
And a lot of people said that she was not a very friendly person. So a lot of people that knew them called her a she-devil. She gained that reputation.
Was there pictures of these people?
Yes, there is.
If there's pictures, we're going to be putting pictures right here.
And then they had their son, John Jr., and their daughter, Kate. And there has been signs that John and Kate were siblings, and there was also other things that said that they were not siblings.
Like incest?
Or that they was married. But there was no proof that said that they was married. So it's...
a lot of times when you find that, it was because the parents didn't let them go out, and they were all kept together.
And it said that many people, newspapers reported that several of the Bender's neighbors had stated that they claimed to be married, possibly in a common law marriage. And there was no papers back then stating that.
Is it the daughter and son you're talking about?
There's pictures of them right here. Want to show that later?
We'll be showing all these pictures.
Oh, yes. And their victims was 11 plus. Their span of the crimes was from 1872 to 1873.
So, what kind of victims were they? Like, who
A
did
lot
they
of
murder?
it were just men. And the ways they had, oh Lord, here we go. And it says the fate of the family members actually remains unknown. So we don't know exactly what happened to them. It says theories range from lynching the family to them successfully escaping.
Oh, so we don't know if they
We don't actually know what their fate was. If they got lynched or if they escaped and got away. And it says much folklore and legend actually surrounds the Benders, making it difficult to separate fact from fiction. So, really, we don't know half this stuff if it's actually true or not. It's just from what we're getting told here. Now, the background of them. In October 1870, there was 5 families of spiritualists that were homesteaded in and around the township of Osage.
Spiritualists, that's kind of like what we are.
Exactly.
We believe in Jesus, but we also believe in the spiritual realm.
One of the families was John Bender Sr. and his son, John Bender Jr., who registered 160 acres of land located adjacent to the Great Osage Trail.
And that's in, what was that?
Kansas.
Kansas.
And it was actually then the only open road for traveling farther west. After a cabin was built, a barn with a corral, and a well were built, in the fall of 1871, Elvira and their daughter Kate arrived. And they turned the little cabin into 2 rooms, and it was divided by a canvas wagon cover.
Aww.
And the Benders used the smaller room at the rear for their living quarters. And in the front, they had like a little general store where they sold dried goods and whatnot.
Well, they had it going on.
The front section also contained the kitchen and dining table, where travelers could stop for a meal, or they could even spend the night. So they had their own little inn, like a breakfast and bed and breakfast. Elvira and Kate also planted a 2-acre vegetable garden and apple orchard north of the cabin. Now here's a little bit about the family. John Bender Sr. was around 60 years old. And from what we said earlier, he only could speak little English, and most of it was unintelligible. It said he was so guttural that you couldn't really understand what he was saying. Now, according to the May 23rd, 1873 edition of the Emporia News, he was actually identified with the name of William Bender. His wife, Elvira, which we said, she spoke little English, and she was 55 years old, and was so unfriendly to others that they called her a she-devil. Could you imagine having a reputation like that? Just because people didn't like you for not being friendly? Now, their son, we're just going to say Bender Jr., he was around 25 years old, and a lot of people described him as actually quite handsome. He had auburn hair and he had a mustache. He actually spoke English pretty fluently, but with a German accent to it.
That would have been attractive.
And a lot of people said he was prone to laughing aimlessly, so a lot of people didn't think that he was right in the head because of that.
Oh, that wouldn't have been so, that would have been scary.
And now we have Kate Bender. She was around 23 years old, and a lot of people said she was cultivated and very attractive. She was a self-proclaimed healer, and said that she could do psychic things, that she had supernatural powers, that she could cure illnesses, and she could also conduct seances.
Kind of like us. We like that kind of stuff.
She also gave lectures on spiritualism, which is cool too. Now, here. She actually gained notoriety for advocating free love. That's where it's starting to sound a little bit.
Or what she meant by that, you know?
Yeah, her popularity became a large attraction for the Bender's Inn. So that's their place, their little bed and breakfast thing.
But she was so popular that people would come to see her.
Now, the older ones, Elvira and John, they kind of stayed away from people. They were more, what would you say, reclusive.
I wonder how they handled all these people coming through, you know?
Exactly. Now, the parents, they didn't really associate with people very much. Now, Bender Jr. and Kate actually attended Sunday schools together. So people seen them actually out in public. And they were actually widely believed to be German immigrants, see? Which we never know.
Yeah.
Either from the Netherlands or from Germany. But there's no documentation or definitive proof that of their relationships to one another or where they were even born. And none of this has been found. John Bender Sr. was from Germany or the Netherlands, and is thought by some to have been born John Flickinger, not John Bender. But there was no proof of that, so we don't know. And also, Elvira was believed to be born Elmira. Elmira Hill Mark. And she was actually married to Simon Mark, with whom she claimed to have 12 children with.
Where are the kids?
Where they at? Where you hiding them, lady? And they had believed that Kate was one of those children that she had with Simon.
Oh, okay. Maybe she was the only surviving child. Because back then, there was a lot of sicknesses, and people lost their children through the sickness.
Exactly. And Elvira was also believed to murder her husbands. Doesn't sound very good.
Aquafina. Ain't that the name of that stuff back in the
Aquafina,
day?
man.
Aquafina.
And Kate was believed to be her 5th daughter. So I wonder what happened to the rest of them. We don't hear anything about that.
I wonder if Kate knew. You know she had to because she was the 5th one.
Yeah. Maybe there's something a little bit shady going on there. And as we said, some people believe that John and Kate were not actually brother and sister, that they were actually married. And here's what people actually wrote about them. The old man was a repulsive, hideous brute without a redeeming trait. Dirty, profane, and ill-tempered.
Brute means big man.
Yeah, big bulk man. And apparently he wasn't a very lovely person either. Now, Miss Bender was a dirty old Dutch crone. Her face was a fit picture of the midnight hag that wove the spell murderous ambition by the soul of Macbeth.
Dang. How would you like to live next to these people?
No. Young Bender seen, when excited, recalled the grave robbing hyena at once to mind.
Grave robbing hyena.
We don't really know.
Dang.
Now Kate, she proclaimed herself responsible to no one save herself. She professed to be a medium of spiritualism and delivered lectures on that subject. In her lectures, she publicly declared that murder might actually not be in the wrong, that it might actually be good.
Okay, a little red flag's going on here, people.
Yeah, in her words, murder ain't bad. Murder's fine. I don't know about that.
And where are all the children that Elvira had?
Yeah, all we know is about Kate. So, it's kind of weird. And, she advocated free love, obviously, and denounced all social regulations for the promotion of purity and the prevention of carnality, which she called miserable requirements of self-constituted society. And I believe there might have been a little bit of some incest going on because of what she said towards her brother.
Yeah. If they wasn't really secretly married.
And here's what she had said in her lecture manuscript. Shall we confine ourselves to a single love and deny our nature as the proper slave? Even though it be a brother's passion for his own sister, I say it should not be smothered. So it sounds like, they was brother and sisters.
Yeah.
But, now here we get to the deaths and things that they've done.
Alright.
In May 1871, the body of a man named Jones was found. His skull had been crushed and his throat had been slit. And they found his body in Drum Creek, which was close.
Mm-hmm.
The owner of Drum Creek claimed, well, he was a suspect.
Mm-hmm.
People thought he was the one that did it because they found him in his land. Now, later on in February 1872, there was 2 more bodies that were found. 2 more men that were killed in a similar fashion. Their skull was crushed and their throats were slit. By 1873, reports of missing people who passed through had become so common that travelers actually started to avoid the trail and didn't want to take it no more.
I wonder what they were doing, if they was like robbing them or...
Exactly. The area was actually already widely known for horse thieves and villains, so there was also that going on.
I mean, did they have proof that they were killing all these people?
Oh, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Also, vigilance committees often arrested some for the disappearances, only for them to be later released due to them not being the person that did it. Many innocent men under suspicion were also run out of the county by these committees. Could you imagine being falsely accused of something and having to get run out from your own home? All you've ever known, probably.
I know the first day we moved into this house, there was an emergency meeting about us.
Before the downfall of them. In the winter of 1872, there was a man named George Newton Longcore. He left Independence, Kansas with his infant daughter, Mary Ann, to resettle in Iowa. They were never seen again.
Aww.
In the spring of 1873, his former neighbor, Dr. William Henry York, went looking for them. He never came back. On March 9th, it began the return, which he never returned. He had 2 brothers named Ed York, who was living in Fort Scott, and Colonel Alexander M. York, a Civil War veteran who was also a lawyer. And he was also a member of the Kansas State Senate.
Oh, it's about to go down.
Mm-hmm. Now, they knew of his travel plans and knew that he was going. But when he didn't come back, they decided that they was going to start investigating.
That'd
see
be me.
what was going down. Now, on March 28th, 1873, Colonel York arrived at the Bender's Inn with a Mr. Johnson, another completely different person, explaining to the Benders that his brother had just went missing, and asked if they had seen him. They admitted to him staying with them, but also suggested that there was a possibility that he had run into trouble with some Indians. I don't believe that. Colonel York agreed, and he stayed for dinner. On April 3rd, Colonel York returned to the inn with a group of armed men. And they arrived there after being informed by a woman that Elvira had scared her off with knives. Elvira, she claimed she could not understand English,
Well,
while the young Benders, her kids, denied that she could too.
you know she probably could have, because she's been, you know, in America for a long, long time.
Now, when York repeated that claim, Elvira became very enraged.
Like she did understand.
And said that the woman was a witch who had cursed her coffee. And she ordered the men to leave her house.
Oh, dang.
Revealing for the first time that she actually knew English, and she just wasn't letting it on.
Oh.
So she was hiding that. Didn't have to stay hidden for very long. Now, before York left, the daughter Kate asked him to return, saying that she could help him find his brother.
Don't trust her.
Yeah. Don't trust any of them. The men with York were convinced that the Benders, and also a family that was neighbors with them called the Roaches, were guilty, and they wanted to hang them all. But York insisted that evidence must be found first, because you wouldn't want to hang some innocent people and then find out later that they weren't guilty.
That's true.
Now, around the same time, neighboring communities began to make accusations that the Osage community was responsible for the disappearances. So there was a meeting that was held in Harmony Grove, the schoolhouse. 75 locals attended, including John Bender and Bender Jr.
Could you imagine 75 people?
And after discussing the disappearances, including that of William York, who went missing earlier, they agreed to obtain a warrant to search every homestead between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek.
Oh! If they got something, they better get rid of the evidence.
Now, despite York's strong suspicions regarding the Bender visit several weeks earlier, no one had watched them, so no one expected or suspected them of anything. And it was not noticed for several days, and after all these things was happening, they fled and left everything behind.
Oh. They're probably guilty.
Now, 3 days after the meeting had occurred, Billy Toll was driving cattle past the Bender property when he noticed that the inn was completely empty. And the farm animals had actually looked like they were being unfed. So they started probably looking like they were starting to starve where nobody was there taking care of them.
Yeah.
But due to the inclement weather, several days lapsed before the abandonment could be investigated. So it took a while before they was even able to investigate anything. Now, the township trustee called for volunteers, and several hundred turned out to form a search party that included Colonel York. When the party arrived at the inn, they found the cabin empty of food, clothing, and personal possessions. So they were getting out of Dodge.
They were gone.
They knew that they was going to get found, so they was like, I am getting out of here. Ain't nobody finding me. A bad odor was noticed and traced to a trap door underneath the bed in the premises. And it was nailed shut.
No. Hey, what's that scary movie? That cabin where there's that
Evil Dead.
Evil Dead.
Don't go in the cellar.
That's the first thing I'm thinking of.
But get this though, there were no bodies under the trap door. It was just blood that had seeped into the soil, and that's what was giving the bad odor. Yeah.
Oh, that about made me sick.
There was no bodies found. It was just blood that had soaked into the soil. The men then physically lifted the cabin, moved it to the side to dig under it, but there were no bodies found.
Dang.
They then probed the ground around the cabin with a metal rod, especially in the disturbed soil where the garden and orchard was.
I mean, if you're going to tell me that she was feeding these people to these people.
Where they discovered Dr. York's body. Where the garden and orchard was.
Oh.
That's where they was hiding the bodies. Using them like
Secret
fertilizer!
window! Secret window!
Oh no!
That's not funny, I'm sorry, but that's the
all-
first thing I thought of.
Yeah.
Him sitting there eating that big old plate of corn. I'm sorry. sorry. I'm
They
sorry.
found Dr. York's body buried face down with his feet barely below the surface.
Oh.
They were using him as fertilizer.
Oh. Was that guy's brother?
Yep.
Oh, man.
They found him. They continued searching until midnight with another 9 suspected grave sites marked before the men were satisfied they had found them all. And they retired for the night. The next morning, another 8 bodies were found. While one was found in the whale, along with a number of body parts.
Oh.
All but one had their heads smashed in and their throat cut. And newspapers reported that they were all indecently mutilated. All except the body of a young girl who was found with no injuries sufficient to cause her death. It was speculated that she had been strangled or that she had been buried alive.
Oh, my God.
So she was the only girl that they had killed. So she was either buried alive or they strangled her.
Oh.
It's awful.
So that's 20?
Now get this. This is freaky.
Oh.
A Kansas newspaper reported that the crowd was so incensed after finding the bodies that a friend of the Benders, yes, he was a friend of them, named Brockman, he was among those onlookers. They were so angered that he was hanged from a beam in the end until he was unconscious. Then they revived him and hung him again.
Dang!
After the third hanging, they released him and he staggered home as one who was drunken or deranged. So imagine that, hanging somebody, reviving them, and hanging them again.
I hung him 3 times, right?
Imagine how messed up that is. They were so angry, and he was known to be a friend of them. So that's why they did it.
I would have moved out of that town.
Also, a Roman Catholic prayer book was found in the house with notes inside written in German. They was later translated, and the text read, Johanna Bender, born July 30th, 1848. John Gebhardt came to America on July 1st, 18. Big Slaughter Day, January 8th, and Hill deported. So there was something going on there. Words of the murders spread really quickly like freaking wildfire, obviously. And more than 3,000 people, including reporters from far away like New York City and Chicago, they decided to visit the site. The Bender cabin was destroyed by souvenir hunters who took everything, including the bricks that lined the cellar and the stones lining the wall. So they took everything. State Senator Alexander York offered a $1,000 reward of the family's arrest. On May 17th, Kansas Governor Thomas A. Osborne offered a $2,000 reward for the apprehension of all 4.
That's a lot of money.
Now here's what their killing method was.
Back then, that was a lot of money.
People that stayed as guests at the bed and breakfast, the host would actually be given a seat of honor, like they was the guest of honor. And it gets really messed up. And the spot was over a trap door that led to the cellar. So they would sit that guest of honor on top of that trap door. That's what kind of makes me think Sweeney Todd. Remember how he had his chair over that little trapdoor thing, and then he would just dump their body?
But what made them pick a person as being there?
Maybe it was just cuz. And it said they was positioned over a trapdoor into the cellar, while the victim's back was to the curtain. Kate would distract that guest, while John Bender, or Bender Jr., would come behind the curtain and strike the guest on the right side of the skull with a hammer. And then one of the women, either Elvira or Kate, would cut the victim's throat to ensure that they were dead.
So that's why all of them had that hit.
The men would come back, strike them on the skull with a hammer, and the women would finish the job.
We're talking about a whole family that does nothing but murder people.
That's messed up. And once they were ensured that the body was dead, they would drop it through the trapdoor, and once in the cellar, the body would be stripped and later buried on the property somewhere. Some victims were wealthy, others carried little value on them, and it was suggested that probably they killed the ones that wasn't wealthy just because they liked the idea of killing somebody. So, they really just killed people just because they enjoyed it. Now, there has been some people who actually got lucky to escape from them and said that they could have been killed. Now, some people, William Pickering said that when he had refused to sit near the wagon cloth because of the stains on it, Kate Bender had threatened him with a knife because he wouldn't sit on that little chair.
Oh, she was out to kill him.
Oh, yes. He got out of Dodge after she threatened him with a knife.
Yeah.
A Catholic priest claimed to have seen one of the Bender men concealing a large hammer. He got the heck out of there. 2 men who traveled to the inn have experienced her supernatural powers that she said she had. Also stayed for dinner, but they refused to sit near that cloth. Of course, you know how that happened. Instead, they preferred to eat their meal at the main shop counter. Kate then became abusive towards them. And shortly afterward, the Bender men emerged from behind the cloth. And at this point, the customers just felt uneasy. They wanted to get out of there.
Yeah.
So that was a decision that saved their lives right there. Now, more than a dozen bullet holes were found in the roof and on the sides of the cabin. So maybe they had made some people mad. Maybe people were deciding to fight back, maybe.
Oh, dang.
Now, here's the escape. Or so we think. You never know. It turns out that it was confirmed that the family had bought tickets on the Leavenworth, Lawrence and Galveston Railroad. Now, John Jr. and Kate left the train and caught the MK&T train south to the terminus in Red River County. So, the brother and sister, we never know, they fled elsewhere.
So they went one way.
And the mom and dad went another way. Now, from there, they traveled to an outlaw colony thought to be in the border region between Texas and New Mexico. And if it's a outlaw place, I don't think anybody's going to go chase you. Because there's outlaws down there.
I don't know, bounty hunters or whatever they would have been. That was a lot of money.
True, so maybe they would risk it. They were actually not pursued, as lawman-following outlaws into this region often never came back. So, they got away.
Or did they? They could have got killed somewhere down the line.
Something had to happen. Now, one detective later claimed that he had traced the pair to the border, where he had found out that Bender Jr. had died of apoplexy. The elder Benders did not leave the train, but instead continued north to Kansas City, where it is believed that they purchased tickets for St. Louis, Missouri. Now, several groups of vigilantes, bounty hunters, were formed to search for the Benders. Many stories say that one vigilante group actually caught all the Benders and shot all of them, but Kate, who they burned alive.
Could you imagine?
That's just a story. You don't know if it actually happened.
Yeah, but why wouldn't they have turned it in to get the money?
Yeah, so there's that being said.
Maybe.
Another group claimed that they had caught the Benders and lynched them before throwing their bodies into the river. Yet another claimed to have killed the Benders during a gunfight and buried their bodies on the property.
But why would they have turned them in for the bounty?
So it's all different things. But there's also the story of their escape, and it spread and the search continued on and on for the next 50 years. Often 2 women traveling together were accused of being Kate Bender and her mother. Could you imagine?
Somebody would have probably accused us.
It was actually reported in 1884 that John Flickinger, who was John Bender, had committed suicide in Lake Michigan. Also in 1884, an elderly man matching John Bender Sr.'s description was arrested in Montana for a murder committed near Salmon, Idaho. Where the victim had been killed by a hammer blow to the head. That sounds pretty similar, but they didn't say anything about the throat being cut, so you never know. The suspect severed his foot to escape his leg irons and bled to death.
That's like Saul right there.
And bled to death. He was like, I'm gonna go! By the time a deputy from Sherryville arrived, identification was impossible due to decomposition. So they couldn't tell who it was.
Oh, man.
Despite the lack of identification, the man's skull was displayed as that of Paul Bender in a San Hammond Saloon until
Prohibition.
prohibition forces closure. The skull disappeared. Whether John Flickinger was really John Bender, it's still unknown.
Somebody probably has that skull right now, I bet.
Claiming to kill that man. You never know. So, they could have got lynched, shot, or burned. You never know.
I never heard of that before.
Mm-mm. And was it a doozy?
All right, I think that's gonna be it for today because I'll let you have the stage today because
And
it
that
long.
was the Bloody Benders.
Yeah, and it's weird because every time we do research like this, guys, somebody ends up making a movie.
There actually has been movies and I think books written about it.
Really?
I believe there has.
Somebody's made one about that staircase where that woman fell down that staircase and they thought her husband did it.
Oh,
I want to see that. I think it's on Hulu.
It's
All
so
right, guys. I
crazy
know y'all
though.
hadn't seen us in like 4 months. We have been around though, because I have a TikTok channel. I have 3 other YouTube
An
channels.
ASMR channel.
Tarot
Tarot
cards, short films.
Yeah.
All of them's under Stormy League. You can find me. And I know y'all probably miss Fira, but I haven't seen her in so long. She's been so busy, and you might see her again. She pops in and out. But baby's not took her place, but
No.
she's my specialist on my cryptids. She loves skinwalkers.
Wendigos.
Anything to do with that. I'm Bigfoot. I love Bigfoot.
Wendigo is like my thing.
But she's my little cryptid specialist. All right, guys. I hope everybody's well. I hope everybody's having a good day. Drink plenty of water. It's hot here. And we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
guys. You're going to have to push.
Ah.
Oh! The
Whoa.
lights. It's out.
Talk about the creep factor.